I never thought the moment that would destroy my marriage would start with something as stupid as a charger cable. All right, Reddit. I need to get this off my chest, because I still feel like I'm living in some weird alternate reality. I'm 34. My wife, I'll call her Jenna, is 32, and we've been married for 6 years. Up until about 3 months ago, I would have told anyone our marriage was solid. Not perfect, but stable. We had a small house, decent jobs, a routine that felt comfortable. Looking back now, I think the cracks had been there for a while. I just didn't want to see them. Jenna always had a bit of an attitude, but lately it had turned sharp. Everything I did annoyed her. If I worked late, I was avoiding responsibilities. If I came home early, suddenly I was hovering. Conversations with her started feeling like walking through a minefield. The first weird thing happened about 2 months ago. I woke up around 2 a.m. and noticed she wasn't in bed. Was whispering into her phone. The second was whispering into her phone. The second she saw me, she hung up. I remember asking, half asleep, "Who were you talking to?" She snapped back immediately. "Why are you spying on me?" That was the first moment my stomach dropped. After that, the little things started piling up. She suddenly started guarding her phone like it contained nuclear codes. If I walked into a room, the screen flipped face down. Notifications were turned off. She changed her passcode after 5 years of never caring about it. Then there were the girls' nights. 3 nights in 1 week. And here's where things get strange. One evening, she told me she was going to stay at her sister's place because they were planning some birthday thing. Totally normal, right? Except around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our shared food delivery account. 2 steaks, a bottle of wine, delivered to a downtown apartment building I had never heard of. I texted her, "How's your sister?" She responded instantly, "Great, we're watching movies." At that moment, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know how wrong yet, but something in my chest just sank. And the craziest part? That wasn't even the moment I discovered the truth. That came 3 days later, and it involved my coworker, a broken car, and the single most humiliating surprise of my life. So yeah, 3 days after that weird food delivery notification, things got even stranger. I was leaving work late that Thursday when my car decided it had had enough of life and refused to start. Battery completely dead. I sat there in the parking lot for about 10 minutes debating my life choices before texting Jenna, "Hey, car died. Can you pick me up?" Her response took longer than usual, about 15 minutes. Finally, she replied, "Sorry, I'm at my mom's helping her with something. Can't leave right now." Now, normally, that would have been fine. But remember what I said earlier. She'd been spending a lot of time helping family lately. So I did what anyone would do. I called my coworker Tyler and asked if he could give me a ride home. He shows up, we joke about my car being a piece of junk, and we start driving. Everything's normal until we pass downtown. And Tyler says something that would end up living rent-free in my head forever. "Hey man, isn't that Jenna's car?" I looked up, and sure enough, sitting outside a mid-rise apartment building was her car. Same bumper sticker, same dent on the passenger side from when she clipped our mailbox last year. My brain immediately tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was visiting a friend. Maybe she came here before going to her mom's. Maybe I was overthinking. But the lie she told me 30 minutes earlier was still fresh in my head. So I asked Tyler to pull over. He gave me that slow, concerned look like he was realizing he had just accidentally stepped into a situation. "You sure?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But pull over." We parked across the street. And here's where things start getting ridiculous. I texted her again, "How's your mom doing?" She responded within seconds. "Still helping her clean. Why?" So now I'm sitting across the street from her car while she's texting me from her mom's house. At this point, my stomach felt like it was full of rocks. I told Tyler he could go if he wanted. He didn't even hesitate, just said, "Good luck, man," and drove off like he wanted zero involvement in whatever disaster was about to unfold. So there I was, standing outside this apartment building, looking at my wife's car, and trying to decide if I was about to ruin my own life by walking inside. But fate had other plans, because just as I stepped onto the sidewalk, the front door of the building opened, and my wife walked out, laughing, with a guy. And not just any guy. It was someone I knew, not a friend, not a stranger. Someone who had been inside my house, someone who had sat at my dinner table. And in that moment, everything inside my chest just went completely cold. That was the exact second I realized my marriage might already be over. And what happened next was even worse than what I saw, because when Jenna noticed me standing there, she didn't look shocked. She looked annoyed. So there I am, standing on the sidewalk like an idiot, staring at my wife walking out of an apartment building with another guy. For a few seconds, nobody said anything. Jenna froze when she saw me. The guy next to her, I'll call him Kyle, looked confused, like he hadn't realized he was about to be part of a disaster. Now here's the twist I didn't expect. Kyle wasn't just some random guy. He was my old college friend. Not my best friend, but close enough that he'd been at our house plenty of times. He'd come over for barbecues. We watched football together. Hell, he even helped me move furniture when we bought our place. And now he was standing there with my wife like they had just finished a date. I remember my brain going completely blank for a moment. Finally, I said the only thing that came to mind. "Thought you were at your mom's." Jenna sighed. Not panic, not guilt. A sigh, like I had just shown up early to something inconvenient. Kyle looked between us and started putting the pieces together. "Dude, wait," he said slowly. Jenna cut him off immediately. "It's not what you think. If Reddit has taught me anything, it's that sentence is basically the national anthem of people who are absolutely doing what you think." I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. "So you're not on a date with my friend outside an apartment that isn't ours, after lying about being at your mom's?" She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." I swear to God, that's what she said. Kyle looked like he wanted to teleport off the planet. "Jenna, maybe we should—" But she snapped at him. "Stop talking." Then she turned back to me like this was somehow my problem. "You followed me here, didn't you?" I blinked. "I was literally driving home when I saw your car." "Convenient," she said sarcastically. At this point, my brain was switching from shock to anger. "Kyle," I said, looking at him. "You want to explain why you're hanging out with my wife?" He ran a hand through his hair like a man realizing every life decision he'd made had led him to this exact nightmare. "Look, man, I didn't know you guys were still married," I finished. He didn't answer, which told me everything. Apparently, my wife had been telling people we were basically separated. News to me. I looked back at Jenna. "How long?" She crossed her arms. "It doesn't matter." Oh, but it did. Because that moment was when the humiliation really hit me. Not just the cheating, but the lies. The fact that she had apparently been building an entire alternate reality where I was the bad husband holding her back. And things somehow got even weirder right after that. Because right as I was trying to process all this, a third person walked out of the building. And when Jenna saw him, she suddenly looked nervous for the first time all night. So my phone starts ringing while the four of us are standing there in this ridiculous situation. For a second, I almost ignored it. But the name on the screen made my stomach twist. Mark. Now Mark isn't just some random guy. He's Jenna's older brother. Big guy, protective type. The kind of dude who once drove 3 hours because someone scratched Jenna's car in college. So yeah, when he calls, you answer. I picked up. "Hey," I said cautiously. His voice came through immediately, tense. "Where's Jenna?" That alone was strange. Standing about 5 feet from me," I said. Across from me, Jenna's eyes widened. Mark sighed heavily into the phone. "Good. Put me on speaker." I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. So I tapped speaker. "You're on." Jenna crossed her arms immediately. "What is it, Mark?" There was a pause. Then he said something none of us were expecting. "Jenna, Dad found out." Her face lost color instantly. "What?" she said. "About the money." Now my brain had to catch up to a completely different conversation. "Money? What money?" I asked. Mark ignored me. "Jenna," he continued, his voice getting sharper. "Dad just called me screaming. He says you've been pulling money out of the family account for months." The apartment guy straightened. Kyle looked confused, and I just stood there trying to process yet another surprise. Jenna's reaction? She immediately got defensive. "Oh my God, he's exaggerating." Mark snapped back. "Exaggerating? He says it's almost $40,000. Silence. Even the apartment guy stopped pretending not to listen. I slowly turned toward my wife. $40,000. She glared at me. "It's not your business." Now something started clicking in my head. All the sudden shopping lately. The designer clothes. The weird charges on our shared credit card. Kyle spoke up first. "Wait, Jenna, you said you were struggling with money." She shot him a furious look. "Shut up." But he kept going. "You told me you couldn't afford rent." The apartment guy looked confused now. "Rent?" Kyle pointed at the building. "She told me she was trying to move out of her husband's place." The apartment guy frowned. "She told me she already moved out." All three of us slowly turned to Jenna, and for the first time that night, she looked cornered. Mark's voice came through the phone again. "Jenna, are you even listening? Dad says if you don't return that money, he's calling the police." That was the moment the entire situation finally cracked open, because Jenna yelled something back that none of us were expecting. I had to take it. Mark went quiet. "So you admit it." She ran a hand through her hair, pacing now. "I needed it, okay? Things were complicated." I asked the obvious question. "For what?" She looked around at the three of us. Kyle, the apartment guy, me. Then she said something that made the entire situation 10 times more ridiculous. I was trying to start over. The apartment guy laughed. "With which one of us?" Nobody had an answer for that. But the night still wasn't done surprising me, because about 10 seconds later, a police car slowly rolled up to the curb. And, apparently, they weren't there by coincidence. So a police car pulls up, right in front of the building. At first I thought it was just passing by. Downtown area, stuff happens all the time, but then the cruiser slowed and stopped. The officer stepped out and immediately looked straight at Jenna. My brain was already fried from everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes, but even I could tell something was very wrong. Jenna froze, not nervous, frozen. The officer walked over calmly. "Evening," he said. Nobody responded. Then he looked directly at Jenna. "Ma'am, are you Jenna Carter?" Her voice came out tight. "Yes." The officer nodded. "We received a report about unauthorized withdrawals from a joint family account." Mark's voice exploded through my phone speaker. "Oh, good. They're already there." Jenna spun toward my phone. "Mark, what did you do?" "I told Dad to call the police," he said bluntly. Now things got very real. The officer looked between all of us. "You mind explaining what's going on?" Jenna immediately shifted gears. And this is where I realized just how good she was at lying. "Oh my God," she said dramatically, putting a hand on her forehead. "This is ridiculous. It's just a misunderstanding with my father." The officer didn't look convinced. $40,000 is a pretty big misunderstanding. Kyle slowly stepped backward like someone escaping a burning building. I think I'm gonna go." The officer raised a hand. "Hold up." Kyle froze mid-step. "What's your name?" "Kyle." "Relation?" Kyle pointed at Jenna and said the worst possible sentence. I thought she was leaving her husband. The officer looked at me. "You the husband?" "Yeah," I said. He nodded slowly, like a man realizing this situation was getting complicated. Then he pointed at the apartment guy. "And you?" The guy shrugged. "Apparently just the guy with the apartment." Honestly, if the situation wasn't my life collapsing, it almost would have been funny. The officer turned back to Jenna. "Ma'am, we're going to need to talk about those transfers." She crossed her arms. I'm not going anywhere. The officer didn't even blink. That wasn't a request. For the first time all night, Jenna actually looked scared. She glanced at me, then Kyle, then the apartment guy, like she was calculating which version of the story might save her. But none of us were on her side anymore. Mark's voice came through the phone again. Tell them the truth, Jenna. She glared at my phone like she wanted to throw it across the street. Finally, she sighed. Fine. Then she pointed at me. I only took the money because I was planning to leave him. The officer looked at me again. You know anything about that? Nope, I said. Then I added quietly. I found out she was cheating about 15 minutes ago. Kyle muttered. Yeah, same. The apartment guy said, First time I'm hearing about a husband. The officer rubbed his forehead. I'm going to be honest, he said. This might be the weirdest domestic situation I've seen all month. And then Jenna said something that somehow made everything even worse. She pointed directly at me. And he cheated too. I blinked. What? Now everyone was staring at me. The officer tilted his head. You want to explain that one? And suddenly, I realized Jenna was about to try dragging me down with her. So Jenna just accused me of cheating, out of nowhere. And suddenly the entire sidewalk went quiet. The officer looked at me. Kyle looked at me. Apartment guy looked at me. Even Mark went silent on the phone. I stared at Jenna like she had just started speaking another language. What are you talking about? She folded her arms like she had just dropped some devastating truth. Oh, please, she said, like you're innocent in all this. The officer glanced between us. Sir? I shook my head. I have no idea what she's talking about. Jenna laughed. That same sarcastic laugh she used whenever she thought she had the upper hand. Really? She said. You want to pretend you haven't been sneaking around? Now I was genuinely confused. Sneaking around with who? She opened her mouth, and then paused, just long enough for everyone to notice. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, Jenna pointed at me again. You've been working late all the time, always on your phone. Acting suspicious. The officer blinked. That's your evidence? Even Kyle couldn't hold back. That's not cheating, Jenna. The apartment guy chuckled under his breath. I rubbed my temples. So your defense is that I worked overtime? She looked irritated now that the accusation wasn't landing. You know what I mean. No, I said. I really don't. Mark suddenly spoke up through the phone again. Jenna, stop digging. But she doubled down. Whatever, she snapped. He's not perfect either. The officer sighed. Ma'am, unless you have an actual allegation, we're getting off track. She went quiet. And just like that, her attempt to shift the blame completely collapsed. The officer turned back to me. All right, back to the financial issue. Jenna immediately stiffened again. And then something happened that surprised everyone. Kyle spoke. Wait, $40,000? The officer nodded. Kyle looked at Jenna. You told me you needed help paying off student loans. The apartment guy laughed. She told me it was for a business investment. I slowly looked at Jenna. So which lie was the real one? She stayed silent. And that silence said everything. The officer pulled out a small notebook. Ma'am, at this point we're going to need you to come down to the station so we can sort out the financial complaint. Her head snapped up. What? No. Yes. She looked around again, at Kyle, at the apartment guy, at me. No one moved, no one defended her. The officer gestured toward the patrol car. Let's go. And that was the moment my wife realized she had completely lost control of the situation. But the craziest part? That still wasn't the end of the night. Because right before she got into the police car, Jenna turned around and said one last thing to me. Something I honestly still think about. She said, "You ruined everything." And for the first time all night, I actually laughed. So Jenna says, "You ruined everything." And I laughed. Not because the situation was funny, but because at that point the entire night had become so absurd that laughing was the only thing left to do. The officer opened the back door of the patrol car and Jenna climbed in, still glaring at me like I had personally orchestrated the whole disaster. Kyle just stood there staring at the ground. The apartment guy shook his head and muttered, "Man, I thought my dating life was messy." The officer leaned into the car for a moment to talk to Jenna, then closed the door and came back over to us. "All right," he said. "This is going to get sorted out downtown. You three are free to go." Kyle immediately said, "I'm definitely going." He looked at me awkwardly. "Dude, I swear I didn't know you guys were still together." At that point, I honestly believed him. Because if there was one thing that had become very clear that night, it was that Jenna had been telling completely different stories to everyone. Apparently, in Kyle's version, our marriage had already ended months ago. In the apartment guy's version, she had already moved out. And in my version, everything was normal. Kyle apologized again and left pretty quickly. The apartment guy shrugged and said, "Next time she calls, I'm not answering." Then he went back inside, and just like that, I was standing alone on the sidewalk where my marriage had basically exploded in the span of an hour. Mark was still on speaker. He finally said quietly, "Man, I'm sorry." I sighed. "Yeah, me too." What happened after that? The financial situation turned into a huge family mess. From what I later found out, Jenna had been pulling money from a shared family investment account that her father managed. It technically wasn't illegal in the way the police first thought, but it definitely wasn't authorized either. The whole thing ended up becoming a civil dispute between her and her parents. As for us, I filed for divorce the following week. Honestly, by the time the paperwork started, most of the damage had already been done that night. Jenna tried reaching out a few times after everything cooled down. At first, she was angry, then defensive, then suddenly apologetic. But by that point, something inside me had already shut off. Not just because of the cheating. It was the lies, the manipulation, the way she tried to flip everything back onto me the second things went wrong.